This is Andrea with Parking Lot Debrief. All right. I am here with Keisha Osborne. I know Keisha from random events of working together at conferences, sitting and having random conversations about some good stuff. Um, and fun little tidbit. This was 2 years ago,
Yeah.
as we sit and wait at a conference to work together and talk about all the things, I said, I'd love to do a podcast. And she says, I'm doing one. And I said, Are you? I'm too scared. She says, I'm
Yeah.
not. And so when it was time for me to try to start this, she was the first person in mind that I was like, she's going to help me have a little courage and talk me through this part. So uh, that's ode to Keisha for that. And the bravery, not the bravery, just the doing it. Just do. You did the
Yeah.
thing. So we have Keisha with us today. Tell us about who you are, how you got here, and the age-old question, which I'm just kidding, but how'd you learn sign language and why'd you become an interpreter?
Oh
I'm
my
just kidding.
God.
It's the best question we
Vomit.
get.
Oh my God. I hate it. Well, I'm Keisha. I'm a sign language interpreter, and I guess the relevant tidbit is that I run a podcast that has kind of been dormant for a while called If I'm Honest, where we talk about the intersection of interpreting and oppression, and address some of those larger issues. Um, So I think that answers that first question.
Yes,
And how did I learn sign language? I'm going to tell you what
I'm
I
just kidding.
told the client today. He asked me, he said, why did you decide to be an interpreter? I said, I was bored. I had nothing else to do. You know what I'm saying? Like, I just felt like, why not just pick
Why
up another
not?
language and just, go and do the work? And yeah, I think, isn't that the best answer? I was bored and I didn't have anything else to do. I think it's a good
Right.
answer.
That is the best answer. I mean, what else do they want? But
Yeah.
yes, podcast, if I'm honest. And I
Yeah.
would say in the truest podcast form, I think you were the first. Because we've
Yeah.
got Terp Tapin, Tiffany and Paris, which are more on the Instagram live, more on the interactive part. I also know Amanda Smith out of Western
Hmm.
Oregon University has a podcast, but that came later. Different topics, different focus. But you were the first to have the nice mic and edit some stuff and put it out there. And actually, I could find it on Apple Podcast.
Yeah.
Um, how did it come to be and why? Why was it time?
Yeah. So, like, the conversations I have on my podcast are happening all
Yes.
over the place. And they typically happen in the same that way that you and I talked about. Me starting a podcast is in these one-on-ones in between jobs. We're having these conversations and these experiences, like we're just kind of sharing information. And we know that they're happening in those little pockets of conversation, but they're not happening on a larger scale. And so you'll have these Black interpreters or interpreters of color having these conversations, but we're not bringing white people in. We're not including deaf people in. We're just having the conversation in isolation. And I thought, you know what? Let's just not, let's figure out how we can raise awareness in a way that's constructive, hopefully, that doesn't give answers, right? Like, I'm very against being prescriptive and telling people how to address these issues, but instead I empower people to think differently. And I think that's the hope.
Hmm.
But it was
You
time
do.
because, I was just like tired of having conversations that needed to happen more globally.
And that's the joys of list and the frustrations of listening to your podcast. Cause I'm like, there's no answer. You're just asking a bunch of questions. But
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
no, but
yeah,
though, and I share these podcasts and I play snippets to students often and they listen to it. And I'm like, right, there are no answers there, but within the
yeah,
questions are the answers. Within the questions are the more conversations that need to be had.
yeah,
Um, and you're right. Also, white interpreters are having these conversations and don't know how to have these conversations elsewhere. But now we have RID needing to get us PPO. So, hey, those are our conversations we're having, but they're podcasts or not podcasts, they're web workshops that also can be great. but I don't feel like they're actually getting to the shit, the things that are actually, I think they're wonderful educational
Listen,
pieces, and I'm sure you have an opinion about
listen.
that.
I do have opinion
Yeah.
about that. I think I ain't gonna we gonna keep it cute. We're not gonna go
Yep.
too deep, right?
Right.
But if we think about when this PPO requirement came
Yes.
about, right? What was happening in the
Yes.
world, right? And likewise, those things are going away. And so it's
Right.
performative, right? It's performative.
It's exactly
It's
what I thought.
performative to say we are doing something in that we are requiring people to do this thing. And just like all the other workshops, we're just showing up, collecting our
Yes.
CEUs, and getting out. Like,
Yes.
thank you for coming. And so it's like, it's insufficient to require people to get CUs we don't want to get in the first damn place. Like, I don't want to sit through no workshop, right? But for the people who are really interested in being better humans, and I said what I said, right? Then there is more to, like, you don't actually need the requirement of getting one, you know,
Right.
PPO. Like, you don't need that requirement. You're doing that work already.
I think that's what drove me partially for making a podcast too, which I imagine you can relate is workshops are great. I've done this job for 19 years. Okay. Are there other options for us to get information? Are there other options
Mhm.
for us to digest? Is there other options? The workshop format is grand, but it's also old. And I
Mm,
wanted some other way for us to have conversation
yeah,
that we were having in a
yeah,
parking lot.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
um, and I guess with, if I'm honest, that podcast, have you gotten a response, positive or negative or any, from the interpreting community?
I don't get enough responses, period. I think
Which is so
I'm not
interesting to
saying I
me.
don't get any, but I do feel like it's not interesting, honestly. I think I don't get enough responses, but one, it's because my primary audience is white people, right? And it's a heavy lift, right? Like what the
Yeah.
conversations I'm having is a heavy lift. And so we do have the pocket of people who are like, that was good. Appreciate you. Thank you for challenging the way I'm thinking about this. We do have those people, absolutely 100%. And also there are people that like, I gotta wrestle with this, you
Hmm.
know, and those people are also mindful of the labor I'm already doing. So they don't want to
Mm,
have a conversation with me to add more labor, right? Because they know that that's a thing. However, comma, it would be really nice to be like, I disagreed with that. Or
right.
anything, right? Like any kind of natural feedback, it would be great. And then you also have very, very few, but they exist, people who want to fight on behalf of deaf people. Um,
Yep.
they exist and they're like, why is this not done in ASL? And
Yep.
I just point them to the one conversation I've had on my Instagram page that was in the comments and said, go talk to her, right? She asked me the same question. I gave her an answer. She says, cool, good to know. And she went on her way.
Right.
All right. So if you have a problem, this deaf person asked me, I answered her question, and she seemed to be appreciative and understanding. So go to hell. Thank you.
That's
You know what I mean?
yes. And literally that was the reason when we talked about this 2 years ago, I said, I can't. I have to do it in sign. And I'm not comfortable doing a full podcast in my second language. It changes
Mhm.
how I speak, my humor, it changes all the ways. So I'm deciding to interpret my podcast, which I'm
Mhm.
wondering if there'll be feedback with that. I wrote down though that earlier you had said people who want to better to themselves or be a better human being don't need to be forced to do X, Y, and Z to
Mhm.
learn. That's one of my not biggest concerns, but my biggest notices, especially as someone who's put on workshops before. The people who show up, I'm like, I feel like I'm preaching to the choir.
Yeah,
I need the people who aren't even in the choir, who don't even want to be part of it, to come listen, which I can't force people to do those things.
sure.
So I guess that's the hardest part is the people who need to hear the message from your podcast may never, ever even tune in.
Well, I think that's unrealistic. I think it's unrealistic. I think this is what we know about anti-racism, right? Actually, let me use anti-autism. I think that would be better. This is what we know about anti-autist is we do a lot of performative bullshit on
Yes.
behalf of fighting for and aligning ourselves with deaf people. Want to make sure that we, right? But some of that stuff is so performative, it's not real, right? And so you have the people who are doing the stuff and they're listening to the thing and they're parroting the talking points, but it's not real,
Right.
right? And I don't know how what percentage of my audience is that, but I know for sure it's a big part, right? Because I think it takes a lot of work and vulnerability to say, "Ooh, I had that wrong." I had
Yeah.
that wrong, right? Like the way I didn't think it mattered if I talked in front of a deaf person. Like I have that wrong, or that's your shit. And sometimes that's true, but like I don't get to decide that, right? Like I don't get to decide that. And so I think um I know today, 13 years in, I still have work to do on my autism. Still, right? Like still. Like I
Yeah.
don't think anybody disagrees with that. But I think people don't realize that anti-racism is the same journey. You can't arrive. There's no such thing as arriving. There's always layers to the onion to peel back. And if you're not doing that work, then you think this is what an ally looks like, and you go about doing that work, and it's cookie cutter. And then when it doesn't fit, you're like, oh, well, I meant well. And, I've said this on my podcast. I don't give a fuck about your intention. Like your intentions are irrelevant to your impact, right? So
Yes.
you have to kind of keep doing the work. And I don't want to be an artist. So I need to make sure that 13 years Keisha is not doing what first year Keisha was doing. But 13 years Keisha is still doing something. I can tell you that.
Right.
And like, what is that thing? And how do we keep doing that work? And how we stay engaged? Because it's hard, right? Like when we keep, like, I should have overcome this by now. That's not real. That's an unrealistic expectation as well. So I don't know. I think we all always got work to do. I'm
And
just
I'm
saying
gonna,
they're not the choir. They're not the choir.
right. And
I'm
I have a
not the
bunch of
choir.
right. I have a bunch of other stuff to say, but that's gonna just jump me to the topic that you've brought up. We, you say all these things of you able to recognize within yourself. I think I want to say, granted, it's a human thing. It may not just be an interpreter thing. People don't even know step one of doing the work. People don't even know step one of why is my chest on fire when like even body awareness of I'm angry. Like I would say that's like number one, not pet peeve, but notice of mine. And I have to just gear it towards the interpreting community because other than my personal life, but gearing towards the interpreting community, that's a barrier in a way of us progressing is just even step one of self work, knowledge, understanding ourselves. And you say so much of that on your podcast. And I've listened to them all. I've taken snippets of them all to give to students. And it all in the end is coming back to knowing ourselves, being aware. I just am one of the questions I was going to ask is like, what is holding the interpreting field back? And I feel like that's like one of the biggest things. Um,
Yeah.
Lack of self-awareness, lack of willing to grow. I get real annoyed when people are just doing the bullshit CEUs. Granted, sometimes getting the CEUs when I see what's out there feels like I just have to do the bullshit just because I don't like the freaking options.
Right.
Um,
Right. Right.
but yeah, I just wanted to pull in that the lack of understanding about ourselves is a huge piece to
Yeah. But
any and all pieces.
I also think the co-modification of the field, right? And I think deaf people talk about this all the time, is that interpreters are now coming into the field um as just a job. But I would say I'm a millennial, so I would say millennials and backwards, right? I don't think that's what we did, right? Like I don't think we came in because we're like, oh, you know what, this would be a cool job. I'm
I'm gonna
gonna
make a
go
bunch of money.
Oh my
Like,
gosh,
no,
I'm gonna roll in the
that's
dough,
not.
make it rain. That is not what happened. I think we had relationships, and I was making a joke earlier about how I learned sign language, but essentially I started going to this deaf church, and I was going to this deaf church, and it had a deaf ministry sign on the thing outside. Y'all get what I'm talking about.
Mm,
And I started going to this church, and they thought that I was coming to get my little form signed from the college down the road.
yep.
Like, oh, you just need those like community hours. Fine, here, sign your paper. And I was like, I don't know about that. And they were like, wait, you're just here because you want to be? And I was like, yeah. And I brought a book that I've learned four signs out of. So I don't know what the hell you're talking about right now. So if you could
Mhm.
slow down and point to the sign that you're using, that would be really helpful. And that mattered to them. And I could see that it mattered to them. And I slowly kept coming to that ministry on Sundays and Wednesdays. And they were like, you know what, you could be an interpreter. And I was like, really? What the hell is that? And
Mhm.
I was eventually I went with their blessing, right? And when I got in the real world and found out that deaf people are mean as shit, right?
M- Many.
Oh, my goodness gracious above. I had to bring those people from Bowling Green, Kentucky with me, right?
Yeah.
And I had to hold on to the fact that I can't interpret from this person whose trauma I'm triggering in some way. I have to interpret to those people who
Yes.
invested in me and shared their language with me. And that's still to this day how I show up. I cannot think about your shit. I think about these people who share their language with me. Um, and I think that's kind of, we all have these like similar, like really inspiring stories. Um, and after so much time in the field, we get tired of doing the work. Like, can I just show up and do the job? And no, you
Yes.
can't.
No.
You can't for a minute, like, just stop caring about human interaction. That's not real. And for us to like get stagnant like that, to feel like we can come to a certain point and then we can stop doing the labor of undoing oppression, the oppression that we are responsible for and cause, or people like us cause, right? Then we stop growing too, right? And then we all contributed to that. Like I stopped wanting to show up on time, or I stopped dressing appropriately, or I'm like, girl, I don't give back, I don't mentor. Like I become, responsible for also the field stagnating because
Feel like there's a lot of people in that zone. And I
yeah.
understand because sometimes I show up and I'm like, man, I wish I worked at the mall like I used to and I didn't have to think and I didn't really have to do anything and I just had to fake
Mhm.
smile. Like that's not what this is. And you're right. I like that argument of, well, this new generation, I'd put myself, I think millennial too. I don't know. What am I? But I don't know. But our generation and younger, we're just here for the job and it's all a manufactured um you're here, it's transactional. I feel like it's a mix. It is, we aren't homegrown like we used to be in the 90s and 80s, 90s. And then we became professionalized and Cameo Hunsaker, I just talked with her on a podcast. She did a research study out of Arizona about the interpreter shortage.
Mm,
And basically, she has a model that she went off from of where the interpreters are in terms of our professionalization, like development. And there's like
mm,
four levels, and we're on like number two. Still, we're an emerging
yeah,
profession and just
barely.
barely.
Yeah.
And she's got all the reasons and why we are where we're at. And there's just, it's all of the layers of everything that we could bitch about in every single episode. Um, but I do feel like I'm in the middle of, it's a person-centric job, obviously. I care about human beings. I'm here for you, but it's also transactional. I show up, I do the job, I leave. I have deaf friends. And that's not because I'm supposed to have deaf friends. I really, really, but the performative piece that you talk about hits home because I see it so much and it drives me fucking crazy. And the tokenism, whether that's
Mhm,
of Black interpreters, of interpreters of color, or of deaf people. I have to have deaf friends.
mhm, mhm.
Students got to get their hours. And I'm like, do not go hang out with creepy old people, old deaf dudes if you don't want to. Like I just the tokenism part is very difficult for me because it's blatant.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but
Well,
yeah,
can I just tell you a secret? I don't
please.
have any deaf friends. I never had.
No,
I've never
nice.
had any deaf friends.
And I think that's
I
okay.
hate it. I mean, okay, so I'm with you on the tokenization piece, right? Like it baby, this is my professor in college who is now the department chair of the program that I graduated from Mason, Kentucky. Once he told us, don't use deaf people for their language. That's weird. I was like, great. I'm never going to another deaf event, right? Like that's extroverted stuff.
But you
Why am I
gotta
doing that?
learn it from them. You have to immerse.
You have
So,
to learn it from them.
which I
And
get,
right.
but
But like
also,
how do you and to be quite honest, like as a millennial, right? And I know this is still happening today, but we came into this field and we were like, ooh, we're gonna be interpreters. And all the single women wanted to marry deaf people. No lie.
yes,
All of
that was the
us. We were
thing.
like,
All
"Ooh,
the
we're gonna
yes,
marry deaf, and we're gonna be amazing interpreters because we're gonna a Wu
yes.
Tang is gonna." It's weird. It's weird
It is
behavior.
weird.
It's weird
That was
behavior.
definitely a thing.
Yeah,
Still is, I'm
and
sure.
it's still a thing, especially with the
That's
older.
so funny.
I mean, generations older than mine, and I'm
Yes.
sure they're gonna listen to this and they're gonna be scathing. They're gonna be pissed.
But
Keisha
it's
said,
true.
I said what I said, and we've all seen it happen. And so it's like, how do you
Less and
come
less
to,
now
yes, less and less now?
because it has become less
Because it's
entwined.
weird. It's
Yes.
weird. And how can I appreciate a culture and a group of people without having to co-opt their experience for my own in some way, like marriage or dating? Like, how do I do that? And I
Yes.
think what's happening is we don't actually have a balance. So now the younger generation, they're just not doing it at all. They're like, I'm
Right.
good. So it's the opposite extreme.
Right.
And so there has to be a conversation about how do we not use deaf people for their language and have to ally ourselves so much that we're enmeshed. And how do we just be like, not show up to the job, do the work, and leave and think that
Right.
that's sufficient, right? When there has to be a balance. There has to be a balance.
There's got to be a middle ground. And what's hard is, and I've said this a handful of times, it's so hard because there's not really another profession to go, what are they doing? Because even spoken language, there's a whole other different layers with that. Um, I just never know what to compare ourselves to, or take note from other professions. When we work with an oppressed group, we are we want to professionalize ourselves. But if for a while, for years, if we felt like we were doing that, that was a dick move to the deaf
Hmm.
community. When I'm like, but no, if I solidify X, Y, and Z, then my work will be better. If I don't have to worry
Sure.
about
Yeah.
this, or this, then my
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
way I act in these situations will be better.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's still true, but I don't know exactly what's holding us back. It's a million layers.
Yeah.
There's a million layers to it.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. I
Uh,
think again, I think it's just about finding like balance. I will say that I feel like I'm developing a friendship with one deaf person, but like only just like right now. And she worked her ass off, but that is very normal for my friends. I just am a little too aloof and I have these really genuine momentary connections. And then I'm like, oh, it's done. Great. I'll see you next time. And then I come back and I have really deep conversations again.
mhm.
I don't actually know people want to continue those connections. And so I miss him. I miss him all the time. But this girl, she's consistent. Like she's like, hey, you
Nice.
want to hang out? I'm like, yeah, it's great. So it's going to allow me to create what's natural to me. And I am
Hmm.
excited about that. And it's not because, of her language.
That I
It's
tell that to
because I actually
students.
like her. Yeah.
That I said I happen to have friends who are deaf because we have things in common. But other than that, I'm not going to deaf night out anymore just to hang out with randos and have conversations because I'm supposed to. Like I can't. It's not genuine. It feels weird. It feels
Right.
icky. I might go just to visit and see if I see my friends that I know, but I can't anymore.
Yeah.
Um, What? Let me see here. So if I'm honest, you have 19 episodes.
Oh my God.
I counted. You say there's 19. I know it's been on a hiatus for
Yeah,
a minute. Do you plan on bringing more back?
I do. I have recorded episodes that are like sitting and collecting dust. They needed a transition episode. And uh to be fair, I was gonna come back in November, October. And I was like, ooh, it's election season. It's election
Yeah.
season. And
Yeah.
I knew that the election season was very heavy,
Hmm.
right? Um and then the election happened. And so there is that.
Yep.
And then after that is Thanksgiving and Christmas, right? And so I thought, when the hell am I supposed to come back?
Yep.
And in addition to that, I moved in September, and my office is fine in its way. It's fine in its way. And so all those things, but I think I did not want, I knew that I couldn't not talk about the election.
Right.
And I wasn't ready to talk about the elections or those kinds of things on the
Yep.
podcast. I feel like my content is sensitive enough,
Right.
and I didn't want to isolate people further, right? You have people who are on the rocks listening to these podcasts. They're on the rocks. They're like, ooh, it's a little too, and I'm trying to keep people, right? Like, and I'm not trying to beg people to stay, but I think keeping people or being sensitive to the sensitivity of my audience is wise, right? And I think it's
Yep.
wise. And after there's going to be a certain point that those people who are sensitive will get to, and there's the door, right?
Right.
There's the door. But for the people that I'm thinking about, they're not there yet. And so I'm going to hold my tongue on something that really is very important to me,
Hmm.
um, that I can't not talk about right now. And so I've waited. And then January is a stupid month. I like travel
Yes.
a lot. It's a stupid month. And so I'm hoping to be back in the next week.
Yeah.
And
And
I
by the
have
time this
two
comes out,
pre-recorded. Yeah.
oh, good. By the time this comes out, I'm sure something will be out. Um, since there aren't any or many people who are interpreters who are recording podcasts, I'm curious what is the hardest part about recording those episodes or the easiest part?
The easiest?
What's the easiest? What's the hardest aspect of doing the thing from beginning to end? Like, I'm starting to figure out what that is, but like, what's the hardest part of that process? Either whether
Honestly,
you're alone or with someone.
the hardest part for me is the mechanics, right? You got to
Oh,
record,
yep,
you got to video record, audio record. Those are two separate processes, means they both have to be edited. Um, and then I'm a little bit of a perfectionist, so I care about at the beginning, I'm a slow talker. So listening to it back was driving me nuts. When I
but you,
watch my Marco Polos back, I speed them up. I'm like, I don't know how poor friends of mine who have to watch this at regular speed.
but it's easier to digest the way you speak. I will say your podcast tone and speed is like perfect. I kind of feel like I'm all over the place and I can't get my thoughts like clear. Your pace is great. I'm
I
sure
appreciate that.
the hardest part is listening to ourselves back.
Sure,
For
sure.
me, I hate listening to my own voice. Yeah.
But people resonate with it. So I think the
Yes.
easiest one, I mean, I have severe ADHD. I am medicated at 40. Um, and ain't no shame in that. I ain't no shame in that. But gathering my thoughts, I do an outline,
Yep.
and then once I do the outline, I try and just get it out in one take. It takes me two or three takes. Like, oh damn, I forgot that. Oh, I forgot that. Oh wait, I have to say this. So sometimes if I don't do the editing in the same day, I go back the next day and add something that I forgot. And that just lengthens the process.
Mm-hmm.
It's just atrocious. Then you have to try and figure out how to make the light the same as it was the day before.
Yep.
You have to put the same clothes back on because like nobody can
Yep.
know that you're like, hey, let me interject this here. Right? Like it's just, and you want to make sure um that it's digestible. And I think I'm digestible, but am I?
Yes.
And I
Yes.
know I hear people say that I am. I do, but like in the process of listening back, I'm like, was that clear? It's the same thing I
Hmm.
think about my interpreting. Was that clear? You know? And sometimes I feel like it was, and sometimes I'm like, it wasn't. And I'm just let it go. Release it to the public and see what happens.
It is, I'd say, and I've only done like two pieces that are 10 minutes that are solo. And the solo pieces, yes, I'm redoing it. And it's really stupid and annoying. And I'm like, just fucking do it. Get it done with. Talking with people, though, we're not going
Easy.
to redo this.
No,
We're
we
just
got the give
talking.
and take.
Yes.
It's wonderful. And
Yes.
honestly, I was talking to Sherette about this. And for people who don't also watch my content, that's one of my best friends. And so
Yes.
I was like, oh, you know what? I am never going to do another solo. And she was like, we don't listen to that podcast for you to talk to somebody else.
This
I
is
don't want you to
true.
think that your audience is here for your conversations with other people. They're good and they're great supplements, but we want to hear what you have to say.
This is
And I was
true.
like, damn, like, just let me be great because it's so much easier.
It's so much easier talking with
Yeah.
someone else. I had this conversation with you when I was trying to start this podcast of the feeling of, well, who the hell are you to say these things? Andrea, Keisha, who the hell are you to think you can put a mic in front of your face and people are going to actually give a shit of what you actually have to say? And it took me a while, 2 years since the conversation we had or more to go, well, I'm someone who's been in this field for a while. It's not like my husband's going to sit down who's never done interpreting and start talking as if he knows what this is. I've actually
Mhm.
done this job for a while. I do have things to say about it. I want to talk with the people about this work. Um, and it's always with the caveat of I'm just coming from my perspective. In no way am I the answer. Um, and I keep getting every guest that I have on saying, well, should there be disclaimers? Why do I get to speak on this? And I'm like, because you can, because you've done this, because you are one of the better voice working into English interpreters that I know. Like, and even if you weren't, why is your point of view and your thoughts and your comments not valuable?
Mhm.
And so I
Yeah,
just, and
I resonate with that, and I do because, um, as I mentioned, I'm in my 14th year, and I was like, I'm never gonna mentor, never doing that.
mm,
That shit is
no,
wild. Like
I
I
love
don't
mentoring.
have anything to. I still feel. Just had this conversation with a younger interpreter last week. I still feel new. Some of my area of improvement, right? Needs improvement. I need to do a SWOT analysis. That girl, this is a threat, right? Opportunity, okay? Weakness. And this actually WOT, those are easy. Okay.
Strength is hard
It's
for
that,
you?
oh my God.
Is
I don't know.
that a self-deprecating, like self-doubting thing that humans just
Yeah,
have, but interpreters
I
also
don't,
we are our worst critic?
I think well, first of all, I think it's a societal issue. I think
Well,
as
yes,
women, we are
absolutely.
taught that we
Yes,
ain't shit and we ain't supposed to be shit.
absolutely.
And so it's hard for me to not feel arrogant when I talk about my
Yes.
strengths.
S-
When
Ah,
I have to like wrestle with this is
interesting.
something I'm good at, period. It's a statement of fact. It is not me
Yes.
trying to lord something over someone else, right? And making that separation because we were socialized to believe it's arrogance, it's cocky, it's unbecoming of a woman. And therefore we can't do that. But I can run you down, honey. I can give you a whole 100 point bullet point
Oh,
list of the rest of it, of my weaknesses, of my areas of opportunity, of my threats, right? I can tell you job by job, right? Um,
we all do
and
that.
so it's hard for me to be to say of my strengths, this is what I can offer a new interpreter. Um,
But yet you
but
have
I
a
did it. I did
podcast,
it.
right?
Yeah, that's insane. And honestly, it happens in isolation.
Which
I'm sitting here in this office, nobody's here with me, and either people scared of me or I just have good content, but nobody's checking me. Nobody's saying, Keisha, that was wrong. I don't know what the hell you were talking about there. Like, no one's pushing back, right? And
I'm sh
even that bothers me, right? Like, even that, because I'm like,
yeah,
I know I don't have perfect thoughts about this. Um, and I
it's
do
all
have
of the
friends who are
above.
like, I don't agree with that. But like, I feel like it damages the integrity of the honesty of the conversation I'm trying to have if you just say nothing when you should disagree
Right.
with me,
Right.
right? And I'm not saying that I've said something disagreeable, but there's no way I haven't. You
Well,
get
we
what I'm
all have
saying?
different points of view. Like I
Right.
can even just even have a point of view, even if it's not disagree.
Exactly. And if you do have a different perspective, I want it, right? Like, how can I expand my thought if you're like, well, I ain't gonna say nothing, or I'm just not gonna listen to her podcast anymore, or whatever the case, whatever's happening,
Right.
right? Like, it has lost the give and take where it does allow me to grow, and I already have, and because I know that, I feel like this absence of relationship. How can I talk about my strengths when my weaknesses aren't clearly identified? I can't identify all of them. Sometimes I have blinders about myself, you know?
Right.
And maybe I'm putting too much weight on that, but like that's perfectionism, right?
It
It's just
is. It
it's
is
wild.
perfectionism. And I think that's why I think that's a wall that literally is this close to interpreter's face of why we're not also moving forward. Well, I
Yeah.
I don't think I have the right to speak about that. Granted, we've got a lot of people speaking about shit that I'm like, okay, you can stop talking now. A lot of people. And the
Hmm.
same fucking people.
Hmm.
So, and I might be one of them. I don't know. But I
Well, it's the men for sure. We want the men to
that's
get back the
it.
podcast mics, like all over the
Yes.
country, maybe all over the world. Let's go and confiscate the podcast
Yes.
mics from the men and then vet them because there are a few of them that are good, but we have heard
Because
some
people have a lot
foolishness.
to say. Right. It's I have that's why I wanted to do this podcast because I want to interview my friends who have a wealth of knowledge who are
Yeah.
too scared to stand up and tell people about their wealth of knowledge. But if I ask you questions, then I can draw it out and then people can have
Mhm.
access to that information. We would have so much fucking awesome research out there. We would have so
Right.
many awesome workshops, so many awesome conversations if people were brave enough to say, I think I do kind of know some stuff about that. Do you want to talk about it? Like not even saying I'm the expert in it. In no way are we saying we're the expert in it. And the last time we had this a conversation before getting on the episode here, the main urge I wanted we kept saying is like, well, why are there only two podcasts so far? Why
Yeah.
is Keisha's talking about a very niche thing that very much needs to talk about? I'm just talking with random ass people. Amanda Smith's talking a lot about how she connects with the work. What else should we be talking about?
So many
Everything.
other things, everything. Yeah.
Everything.
But we have to, address the elephant in the room that podcasts are ex exclude deaf people.
Of course. Of course.
And
That can
then
be made
that makes
accessible.
people feel inherently honest, right? So people are
That's
like,
why
I
I didn't want to
can't
do
do
it
a
in the
podcast.
first place. I'm
Exactly why you don't want to do
scared.
it. But people who are listening to this aren't finding inspiration. They're like, dang. They're not saying, "Oh, I have something to talk about." They're like, "Nah." They're not even open to
Right.
joining the conversation or adding something different to this very grossly undersaturated,
Huge.
format for interpreting. And I think it's another reason why we're not growing, right? It's because we
Yes.
are stuck in workshops
Yes.
without moving with the times, right? The times
Yes.
are podcasts, the times are, TikToks and video
Yes.
conversations and snippets. And I mean, they're, live events, tonight's, conversation, right? That's what's happening right now. That's what people want. And we're like, well, I'm gonna go to this workshop
And
and
sit.
sit and it's boring, but I'm gonna collect these CEUs and what's my RAD number again? Nobody wants to
Right.
do that.
Well,
Nobody
and
wants
I'm
to do that.
like, I understand why RID would make an audio-based podcast. Sure.
Sure,
I understand
sure,
that.
sure.
But even make one that's signed and then have it interpreted into English. Fine.
Yeah,
But like, why
fine.
isn't our governing organization giving us information in a platform that is super relevant? And podcasts are not new anymore. Like
Right.
this also isn't old and out of date yet.
No,
But
no.
like, I, it just drives me crazy that
At the very least, short form content, right? Like if it's
something,
video, you got the minute. TikTok used to be 60 seconds. Like they're not even doing that, right? And mm,
Yeah.
how can we
And
grow if we're antiquated and
we're
outdated?
very antiquated. Well, and that just brings me back to the point of like, well, who the hell are you? Well, everyone's someone, and I understand, and I will be very vulnerable that the response that I've gotten from even people who are near and dear to me are you sh yeah, I understand your fear because you're white and you're straight and you're hearing. And I'm like, those are my identities. Absolutely.
They
Yes.
are.
Thank
They
you.
are.
And I understand that our field by numbers are white women, and we already suck up a lot of space and we already have things to say. That stopped me for a long time too. I'm like, well, I don't want to stand out in front and think that I have to be the voice and say the things. And I think the fact that I interview people and try to bring in, I'm just trying to bring the platform for which all can talk. Um, so it is very
Yeah,
scary. It is very vulnerable
sure.
to
Sure. And I think and I've said this before, but I don't think that being hearing or being white or being female, and let's just tack on some of these other like stereotypical Christian
yep.
and whatever else, the narrow identities, let's just say you have all of them, it still doesn't disqualify you from having something really important to say and add to the field, right? And to suggest that it does is grossly reductive, and will rob the field from actually growing because we're
That's
putting
what
you in
I
a
think.
box. And also feel like the conversation that we're having right now isn't targeted at white interpreters who look like you. It's targeted at everybody. Like, yo, come
Everyone.
one, come all. Deaf, hearing, well, come on, y'all. Let's have a broader conversation. And how do we do that? Like how do we do that in a productive way that values our work as interpreters, but also has positive impacts for the work that we're doing with deaf people? Because that's the
Well,
goal.
and that, literally always that's the end goal is to better ourselves, which in the end betters everyone we work with. And I've got plenty of CDI friends lined up to come and talk on this show with me. Um, and they're like, this is a good idea. I'm like, steal it. Go. A
Feel
CDI
it.
podcast would be, you know how many students and us
Insane.
interpreters would love to be in the insight? I want to know what you all talk about. I want to know what you need from us. I want
Yeah.
to know uh, I want agencies on. I want to pick your brain. Why am I
Yeah.
so angry with you? I don't want to be so angry with you all the time, agencies. Like, I'm just,
Yeah.
yeah, the quiet
I want to have
conversations are what's
conversation. I
happening.
also want to have conversations with agency. I find them, especially the larger ones, are just
Yes.
harm on wheels. Like
Yes.
it's just terrible. And they're not gonna show their face. Not on
No,
my podcast. Not on
that's what
my
I
podcast, but
wondered.
they might. There's no way. I mean, I think, but there's no way because I think the invitation already comes with the tenor that this is problematic, right? So you can't show up to this conversation and not be willing to own that, right?
Which,
And that's
right, who are we
hard.
gonna find? That's the
What are we
problem.
gonna find? I think we could
Mm.
find smaller boutique agencies that are
Yes.
doing it differently. And then I don't actually know. And working for those agencies is also harder for me to see because I'm comparing it to these larger jackass agencies, right?
Right.
And so now it's harder because it's so close that it's starkly different. You're like, I don't actually know how to see your problems. Um, and we kind of require them to be vulnerable and say, yeah, like here's where I mess up too. And this
Yeah.
is how I'm working on improving the things that I saw that I find to be harmful and don't want to replicate, right? Like that's a really hard conversation. And the conversation that I'm willing to bring to the table, people really aren't.
No. No.
Like I show up to my podcast and I bare my soul and I say, here, take it,
It's
right?
scary.
It's scary. It's
And a
scary.
lot of people haven't even done the work to even begin to know how to do that. And I still am in the middle of all that work forever and always. And
Yeah.
I'm 40 this year. And I said this is my sign for bravery this year. It's
Yeah.
the fuck you from under the chin. Like I have to find a space of like, I'm going into this with a good heart. I'm not coming in saying I'm representing all. I'm just trying to bring a conversation.
Yeah.
Um, and we need more people to do it.
Yeah. Well, we're having a moment. I'm 40 next month. So,
Ah, I'm 40 in May, so not yet.
okay. Huh?
But
Yeah.
Um, we've got a handful of minutes left. I always just like to ask people, or maybe this is just applicable to what we've been talking about, like, what is your biggest pet peeve for the field at large, and then biggest pet peeve on the job? Just in terms of like, ooh, this drives me nuts.
Mm-mm. You work with me. I'm too chill.
You are very chill, actually. That is true.
Yeah, I'm
It is
really,
true.
I'm chill. Like pet peeve on the job. I don't have any of those unless I don't know where I'm going. Like if you haven't given me clear instructions about where I'm going, like I want to be able to kind of roll in and
Yes.
like chill and coast because the work is hard enough, right?
Yep.
If you can't make that, that's the only pet peeve if it's not easy. If every step of the way is arduous and I've got to fight you for information about this and you gave me this wrong information, how am I supposed I don't want questions. I want to know, I
Yep.
want to have everything. I want to be able to open my Google Drive or whatever it is and know exactly what's happening, where I'm supposed to be. That's
Yeah,
the
that
only
doesn't.
pet peeve I have. What was the second question to that?
Just like if for the field at large, what's something maybe you want to happen, or we've kind of talked around that, but
Yeah, we have.
yeah,
It is the lack of growth in the field, right? So we've talked about this, but I think one of the reasons that the field is behind is because deaf people are behind, right? And deaf people, I don't mean that deaf people aren't progressing. I don't mean that they're not getting educated. I mean that there are some deaf people who are completely, you know, they are using interpreters, they're very successful, and then they are able to go down, but there's the largest population of deaf people, right? The larger population, the 95% aren't doing the same thing. And so if we follow the top 5%, then and then the the lower half or the lower population, they aren't able to progress in the same way, right? And so they're still, because they're experiencing so much oppression, how can they continue to grow and heal? And then we as part of our identities, have to ally ourselves with them to make sure that they're doing whatever. And so we get stuck in attaching our identity instead of saying, I will support you, I will ally with you, whatever it is that you need that I can be responsible for, I'm down, I got you. Also, as a field, as someone who is responsible to the work and what that work looks like and how we progress in the work, it's a separate issue, but we are keeping them tied as a
yeah,
professional instead of our identities as allies and how we progress in the work. We're keeping them tied together when really they're separate, you know. And our allyship should be dictated by what deaf people are saying they need. And it is not that we need to fight for them and that become our identity, but like, here I can support you. And I think that the two factions of deaf people have to figure out how do they come together and then move forward together.
so
But
then we
that's not
can,
what's
yeah.
happening. Yeah,
Someone
that's not what's
said
happening.
something about allyship of there's a fine line between care and control. And I feel like that is a huge thing, huge thing. And to me, I could be totally wrong. I feel like there's a generational span of what that allyship looks like, how we behave on the job. Not saying either one is right or wrong,
Right.
but I feel like that's societal. Like, I don't know that that's
Yeah.
just special to interpreters, but like,
Yeah.
I'll go and interpret for a younger deaf person. They want nothing to do to talk to me.
No.
They don't want that small talk. It's a
Yeah.
generational thing. So I feel like we'll move in that direction because society's kind of moving in those directions, but we'll never just be transactional, I don't think. Virtual's
No.
made it feel a little bit more transactional.
Yeah. But
Um,
the problem with virtual is the accountability was reduced grossly, right? And
oh,
people didn't feel responsible to debrief or to talk about what didn't
oh,
go well about this. Right. And so now we're stagnant because you're not even willing to say, damn, I did a terrible job or give me some feedback or let's keep engaging about this work. But I also think I love what what you bring up in terms of care and control. It's just not about us, you know? Like it's just not about us. And I know that my statement that deaf people aren't progressing in the same way right, these two different groups, is evaluative and a little bit of a judgment. Um, and it's an honest conversation, right? Like, and maybe my perspective needs to be shifted about this. But we've seen it, we've
Hmm.
seen it. And so it's like, I ain't, yeah, right. But like, let's be real. But also, what am I responsible for? And I
Right.
think it's just that's why the work keeps changing, right? That's the work that we are supposed to do as better humans. The work is going to keep changing for us.
Hmm.
Again, so Keisha at year one, Keisha at 13, Keisha at 20, right, should not be the same damn interpreter. And there are interpreters who
Sadly, good
are
God.
the same. Maybe you was sounding like that 10 years ago. What's happening here? Talk to me about what's happening
I
here,
I
And
keep
so it's like,
getting I keep getting working with people who've worked for 2 years, for 4 years, and they're obviously new, but wonderful and just fine, can do this job that they've assigned you to,
mhm,
great. And they often ask me that. They're like, why do I keep meeting interpreters who've done this for 40 years who I feel like I'm better than, but yet I'm a peon compared to where they are because of their years?
mhm.
And I'm like, yeah, that's tr that right. That's my frustration. My frustrations are those folks who coast when this is not a coasting job.
It's not a coaching job, but it goes back to what you were talking about, generational divide, right? So if we
It
look
is.
at like silent generation, the boomers, right? They stayed in their jobs for 50 years, right? They
Right.
married that job and then they retired after they
Literally.
worked it for
Oh, the deaf
50
person. They
years.
married the deaf person too.
They,
So
they married the deaf person too, right?
literally.
And so, right? So there's that whole notion of coasting. Whereas the younger generations are not staying in the job for 5 years. We're like,
Right.
I'm gonna keep
Right.
changing, I'm gonna turn it around, I'm gonna make more money, I'm gonna keep growing
Yes.
and stretching, I'm gonna move something that challenges me differently. I'm not gonna stay in a place that I'm not appreciated. We don't
Yes.
coast, right?
It's getting
And
harder.
it's getting harder, right? It's getting harder. And when you look at those older generations, they're also stuck in helper models, right?
Yes.
Call it, name the thing. They're stuck in that model. And I was just talking to an interpreter today who's 30, and he told me several times he was 30, so it's stuck. But he talked about being 30, and he was like, "Yeah, I worked with this older interpreter." And he says it just like that. I worked with this older interpreter, and she was talking about staying in the hospital room with the deaf patient and being like, "We'll talk about that later." Right. And he was like, "Oh," he was completely alarmed. And I was like, "Yeah, right.
People
Stuck,
still do.
stuck." Right. I, okay. To be fair, DMV is a little different than other places. I don't know how they roll other places, but we don't do that here. So for her saying that is like, it's alarming, but it just goes to show that there are some generations that are stuck and coasting. This is the way we've always done it. And I don't actually mind marrying the job and keeping it for 50 years. And I do, you know, different. It's different.
Okay. Well, thanks, Keisha. Um,
Yeah.
we could go on for a long time. There's I don't know, so much to talk about. People should tune in to If I'm Honest when it's back out, which will be soon, because now we've put the pressure on and she's got to do it. So,
Gotta do it.
got to do it. Um, I always ask folks at the end, anything specific you want to say to put your mentor hat on, because I know you love to wear it. Anything you want to say to students, just in general, or any students.
I think I've said enough.
Okay, you
I
have.
think
All
I've
of
said
that was to
enough.
students.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so.
Um, And is there a deaf-owned business or organization you want to highlight? There was one you mentioned.
I can say that in the DMV area in Hyattsville, there's Streetcar 82, and I know a bunch of my friends and I go and have drinks there, and it's a
Nice.
good time. But I mean, it's just what
Perfect.
we do.
Yeah, brewery, Streetcar 82. I'll put that link in the show notes as well if people want to check that out. But awesome. Thanks so much. I
Yeah.
appreciate your time. your brain, your thoughts, and check out If I'm Honest.
It's a good time. Thanks for having me.